Welcome back to the 8th concession. My name is Natalie. Well, today I have a chore to do, and although I've said this many times so far this season, I feel like I'm late doing this, and that is I am going to plant my potatoes today. Now, potatoes are pretty much a cool weather crop. You can technically plant them as soon as the frost is out of the ground, as long as it's not too wet. They will rot in the ground if it continuously rains, which it actually has done a lot this year, but I'm not planting them in the ground anyway. I have a different way that I like to plant them. But before we get started with the potatoes, you might notice what is around and above me. Yes, we have the gazebo back together. It's up and functioning. There is still damage. I mean, there was no getting away from that. This is the post that was bent, and I think we can see that it is definitely damaged. And I had to re-sew some of these corners up here. You can see that one still has a bit of damage on it. There was a patch I had to do. I don't exactly know where the patch is anymore. But it is still working. It is upright. It is staying upright. I did notice inside, I think I can show here, there are a couple of spots. You can see the light coming through where it rubbed on the ground. So it's not going to be completely watertight in here anymore, but those few spots I can deal with. Craig also brought some pavement screws. I think that's what he called them, not concrete screws. So he is going to screw the legs in. You might see this red strap here. The day after we put it up, we got some pretty strong winds again, and I was just so nervous that it was going to go. So Craig just sort of tied it down for now, but he does have the screws to screw in the four legs, which he is planning to do today because we're getting more weather. Hopefully not high winds, but there's no guarantee. Anyway, I'm really happy to see it back. So let's talk potatoes. Now, as I showed you, these are the potatoes I'm growing, and you might notice that they are just grocery store potatoes. So what is the deal with seed potatoes, and why should you or do you need to even grow them? Well, I looked into this pretty carefully. I've always grown just some of the potatoes that I had in the house that started to sprout. And then I'd see seed potatoes in the store for a lot more money, and I'd wonder, am I missing something? So looking into it, the reason people buy seed potatoes and they recommend seed potatoes is that some potatoes that are grown for eating are sprayed with something that's supposed to inhibit sprouting so that they'll last longer on the shelves. It makes sense. And so they say, well, you can't use store-bought potatoes because they won't grow. I beg to differ. I'm sure not all of the potatoes will grow, but if you have potatoes that have already started to grow, obviously a sprout inhibitor hasn't been used or it wasn't effective, and I've planted these for years. Now, the other thing about seed potatoes is they're certified to be disease-free. So that is something you have to consider when you're planting potatoes in your garden that just come from the grocery store. If I were a commercial grower, certainly I'd want to use certified disease-free potatoes. You do not want your whole crop ruined. You do not want disease now in your soil. The way I plant my potatoes in the garden, they're not actually in one of my garden beds. If there was some sort of disease to affect them, I have a way that I can contain that and not have it spread. So I'm not really that worried about it. And although we want these for eating and it really helps with our grocery budget, if worse came to worst and a disease affected these potatoes and I didn't get a crop, we still have the option of buying them at the store. We're not going to go hungry. So for me, the risk is worth it, the risk that there might be a disease, although I have to say, I think only one year did I even buy seed potatoes. The rest of all the years I've been gardening, I've just used store-bought potatoes and I've never had a problem so far. So you have to assess the risk for yourself. If you're really worried about disease or if you've had a problem with disease in the past, you might want to go to seed potatoes. If you haven't had a problem and you don't want that expense, yes, you can in fact grow potatoes from the potatoes you buy in the grocery store. And when you look at the prices, wow, seed potatoes are not cheap. I did a little searching around, and I found some of these seed potatoes listed online. Now, the prices are often not even for a 10-pound bag. They're for a 4 or 5 pound bag, and they are $9 or $10 or $13. Now, this bag of potatoes I actually bought at the grocery store, and I got them on sale even. They were $3.99, which was a really good sale around here. Potatoes are running around $5.99 regular price, but these were on sale for $3.99, and they are my favorite. They're the yellow flesh. That's the type of potato we like to eat the best. And so I was using them, and then I noticed that because I bought multiple bags, one of the bags, they were starting to go soft, they were starting to sprout, and I thought instead of eating them, I'm going to plant them. So I took the rest of them and I put them in my cold cellar so they wouldn't grow too quickly before I could get them in the ground. And so I have 10-pound bag of potatoes for $3.99. Now I'm planting only about half the bag, so my potatoes for my garden are going to cost me around $2. And I think that's a great price because the seed potatoes would be about 5 times that, about $10 for a 5-pound bag at the feed store. That's a great savings when you're trying to plant your garden so that you have, you know, a cheaper food source and a better food source. You do want to save that money where you can. As I mentioned, part of the reason I'm not as concerned about disease spreading in my garden from not using seed potatoes is that I don't actually grow the potatoes in my garden. And that's because I'm growing my potatoes in grow bags. Now, these grow bags happen to be from the dollar store. I think I bought these last year. They might be $5 now. They were $4.50 when I bought them, and they are a large size grow bag. Now, if you buy them online or from maybe a garden center, and I just want to show you, they're quite large. If you buy them at a garden center, they're going to cost a lot more than $5. And so the first year I got them, I thought, well, let's see how they last, because if I have to buy a new one every year, I'm not going to save much money. But what I have been doing is at the end of the season, after I harvest my potatoes, I dump the soil into one of my garden beds. Now, of course, if there had been disease on my potatoes, I would not add that soil to my garden beds. I would dispose of it somewhere else. But as long as my potatoes are healthy, I take the soil that's in the bag, I dump it in one of my raised beds for the winter, and then I store these empty and dry just in our back porch. They're not even in the house. And then I'll refill them again the next year. And this is a brand new one, but the other ones you can see in my wagon back there. The original ones, this is now the 3rd or the 4th year that I'm using them, and they're holding up really well. So for this amount of money, if I can get 4 seasons out of it, that's only costing me about $1.25 a season to plant them in a bag. Now, the other good thing about planting my potatoes in bags rather than in the garden beds is that I can move these around. I can put the bags in a spot in the garden that wouldn't maybe have enough room for another crop, but there's enough room to tuck in a bag or a bucket. But I don't want to use plastic buckets, so I've been using these bags. So I've had great luck with them. What I do is I don't put soil in them at all. I put compost in, straight compost. And the pile back there under the tarp is the free compost that we got at our local landfill. Now, I don't know if they have this in all areas, but in our area, residents can go and get free compost at the landfill in the spring. Actually, I think pretty much all summer long as supplies last, and just fill up and use it for free. Now, the compost comes from the leaf collection that the city does, and they also collect yard waste, and they compost that in great big piles, and it's really quite nice compost. Now, that being said, I did notice last year there were little bits of plastic in it, so I guess some people were not being careful about what they were putting in their yard waste, which annoys me greatly, but I do pick them out. So it's not perfect. It is free. It's the trade-off. So I'm going to be filling my fiber bags here straight compost, and I'm going to plant my potatoes in them, and I'm going to try and get this done before the rain comes because we have more rain forecast. I'm worried we're going to have another wet summer, but there's nothing we can do about it. So this is the chore. I've got about an hour before it rains, so let's see if I can get this done. You'll notice this year I decided to put the bags sort of all together in this empty area here instead of putting them where they were last year, which is right behind some of the garden beds. And that's because I discovered that last year the voles for sure, and maybe also the moles, were using the bags at the end of the garden beds as cover so that they could dig under them and then right under the blocks and into my garden beds. I had to do some repairs this year to some of the walls because of the tunnels underneath. So I thought this year I'm going to move them away from the walls so that they don't have that cover, and maybe I can prevent so much vole and mole damage to my beds this year. So the nice thing is, if I don't really like where they are there, they are light enough that I can move them around again. But for now, I'm going to leave them there. Last year I tried to plant corn in this empty area, but they didn't do well. I don't know where I'm going to do corn this year, and I'm not sure if I'm going to get the other 3 beds in that I planned. It's not totally off the table yet, but it might be. I'm going to cut some of the potatoes in half. Last year I put 2 potatoes in each of these pots, and they seem to do fine like that. Some of the smaller ones I'll leave whole, but I only have 12. I have 12 and I have 10 pots. So I'll just do some whole ones. The small ones I'll leave whole. The bigger ones I'll split in half, and I'll see how that goes. You can see that I only filled the bags between half and 2/3 full. That's because I'm going to plant the potatoes just under the top of the soil, and then as they start to grow, I'm going to cover them so that none of the potatoes get that green from being in the sunburn. I might experiment with putting straw on some of them this year if I have leftover straw from the chickens. Maybe I'll do half and half and see if the ones that I cover with compost are any better than the ones that I cover with straw. It could be an interesting experiment, but for now I'm just going to put them just under the soil. Well, the rest of my vegetables have pretty much hardened off on the back step. I've been leaving them out overnight, so they're ready to go in the garden, but the weather's not cooperating. So I'm going to have to wait maybe until tomorrow to plant all the rest of my plants, but I'm happy that today at least I got the potatoes in. Small victories, right? Hope your garden planting is coming along. Bye for now.